name is Patrick Bouic. I'm an immunopathologist associated with the University of Stellenbosch in Cape Town. I am with the faculty for the last 28 years. I studied partly in South Africa, and also I did my PhD in immunology in Lyon in France. And I've been back here in this country for the last 20 odd years. My interest has always been researching the medicinal properties of natural plants or natural sources, and over the years I've worked on several plants with very promising results.
You've mentioned that you studied the medicinal properties of many plants. Which one has been the most fascinating and why?
For the last, as I said, 20 years I've been approached by different companies, different individuals who came forward believing that their plant extract could cure cancer. We've seen put on the market a natural product which has immune modulatory properties. Others which are still in the research stage, we'll be looking at the possibility of a mixture of two plants to be able to kill certain bacteria, in other words, natural antibiotic. But personally, the most exciting for me for the last 15 years that I've been involved is looking at the medicinal properties of the Angostura plants, a unique plant which grows only in the Western Cape, here in South Africa. Obviously the Angostura being more commonly known as a Buchu plant. There are several different species or strains of the Buchu plant. The one I'm specifically referring to is the research that was sponsored by the Cape Kingdom Nutraceutical, the Buchulife range of products. Very specifically, it's a formulation of different plants which we know have the properties that we are looking for, namely the anti-inflammatory properties.
You mentioned the inflammatory action or properties of Buchu. Now we know that inflammation is a biological response of the body to infection or irritation. If Buchu helps with inflammation or inhibits inflammation within the body, will this also prolong the healing process?
No, not at all. When we're talking about inflammation or anti-inflammatory properties of the Cape Kingdom products, here we're talking about the chronic inflammatory process. Inflammation has two phases: the so-called acute phase, the sudden onset, it only lasts for about 4 or 5 hours. That is a beneficial type of inflammation. That is tissue repairing. It's a normal, natural physiological response. The problem is, if that inflammation is not controlled, it goes over into a phase 2, which is the chronic inflammatory process, and that is tissue damaging. And this is where Buchu has the most potent activity. We've been able to show, for instance, that during the process, very important inflammatory markers are secreted by certain leukocytes in the blood, namely the monocytes. These factors are called interleukin 6 and TNF-alpha, or tumor necrosis factor alpha. These are the factors which are involved with things such as rheumatoid arthritis, with cancer, and all the other chronic diseases, including cardiovascular disease. Now, Buchu extract that we work on is able to switch off the synthesis and release of these factors by these leukocytes. Now that's important because we're not dealing here with a product which simply takes away the pain of the patient. What we are doing here is the plant extract is actually able to get to the genetic level of the cells, releasing these factors and switching those genetic messages off. Now obviously here we are addressing the underlying causes and not just treating the symptoms. Very different type of approach of an anti-inflammatory.
You mentioned that inflammation is linked to many chronic conditions such as cancer and heart disease. Will the specific Buchu extract that you are working on help to reduce the risk of developing these conditions?
It's a very good question. If we look at the latest scientific literature, we know now that cancer thrives on the presence of underlying inflammation. So cancer is partly inflammatory, and the cancer cells survive as a result of this ongoing secretion. The other chronic conditions that we mentioned, cardiovascular disease, we all know, for instance, that someone who presents with raised cholesterol or blood lipids, the first thing we do, we tend to prescribe a statin. While later studies show, in fact, that the statins make no difference unless you address the underlying inflammation. This was published in fact 2 weeks ago in a very, very prestigious medical journal, which the authors were saying for all these years we've been wrong as far as the management of chronic cardiovascular disease. So we've spoken about cancer, we've spoken about cardiovascular disease. The underlying inflammatory conditions such as osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, other autoimmune diseases, including diabetes, are all inflammatory processes. So it's inflammation that mediates and perpetuates the pathogenesis of these diseases. So I think that as time goes by, we'll see more and more studies come forward where we will be able to show that by simply being able to switch off inflammation, you will be able to not only manage your patients better, but I think also prophylactically or prevention is that we should be telling people don't ever become inflamed. Use a natural anti-inflammatory to prevent the onset of this inflammation.
There are many conventional medications or anti-inflammatories on the market, such as Advil, Tylenol, and Voltaren. How does the action of Buchu contained within the Buchulife products compare to these?
Most of the drugs that are currently registered on the market as anti-inflammatories, they address predominantly the pain aspects. In other words, inflammation is always linked to swelling or edema and pain. Now, most of the drugs actually switch off the factors which are only linked to pain, the prostaglandins. Compared to the Buchulife products or the Buchu extracts that we work on, very different, because as I mentioned, these products or the natural products have molecules in them which get down to the genetic level. So in other words, it switches off the synthesis of both of these factors, not only your chronic inflammatory factors such as TNF-alpha and IL-6, but also the prostaglandins are also switched off. So it's addressing two aspects. The pain, yes, but also the synthesis and release of the self-perpetuating factors called inflammatory markers.
With regards to other natural products on the market, how does Buchu compare to Aloe Vera and Arnica?
Very different. I mean, Aloe Vera is well known here in the Western Cape, in fact in the world, as being a potential natural product for inflammation. Not very comparative. We cannot actually compare Aloe Vera to Buchu in the sense that Buchu has a very wide variety of different molecules contained in that extract which has different aspects of biological activity. Aloe Vera contains predominantly antiviral molecules, not much of an anti-inflammatory, although it is sold and marketed as being a natural anti-inflammatory. Very little anti-inflammatory properties can be ascribed to Aloe Vera. It has a very potent antiviral, but Buchu is a much more potent anti-inflammatory. As far as Arnica is concerned, Arnica is one known to cut out the edema, the swelling. That is why whenever patients go in for surgery, we always suggest to them that they load themselves up with Arnica to prevent the post-surgical swelling. It does not have much pain relieving or even anti-inflammatory properties. All it does, it prevents that edema of the tissue or the tissue damage during the procedures.
Do you believe that natural products such as Buchulife can ever replace the harsher medications currently found and used on the market, such as Advil and Tylenol?
Certainly. One has to just cast your mind back in the last 2-3 years, how many new anti-inflammatories with very potent activities, the so-called COX-2 inhibitors, reached the market, but within a year they were withdrawn from the market because of side effects. So I do believe that the Buchulife product will definitely, as we accumulate more and more science as to their medicinal properties, would one day be able to replace, firstly for its safety profile, that we know it's totally safe. It's been out there used and ingested by millions of people for the last 30-40 years, firstly, and secondly, because of the mechanism of action, I think it's a lot more specific, a lot safer, and I really do believe that one day these natural products might replace the so-called drugs.
Have there been any other breakthrough discoveries in relation to the medicinal properties of Buchu?
Yes, we've been speaking about inflammation, very exciting, just recently conducted research in animal models of diabetes. We know that the Buchu extract from the Buchulife range also contains anti-glycemic properties, in other words, able to control blood sugar. So here we're talking about the management or prevention, hopefully one day, of type 1 as well as type 2 diabetes. This would be the first natural product having this having this property of being able to control diabetes. There are other properties as well which we're currently researching. We've been busy with this research work for the last 15 years, so it's not an overnight discovery, it takes time. We're now at the stage where we are fractionating the plant extracts to discover exactly what molecule is responsible for which biological activity, and that unfortunately does take time. So at the moment we're dealing with a plant extract which we know can be ascribed several biological properties. It's not a panacea, it's not the same molecule doing the different properties. At the moment, the one extract contains many molecules, and we're trying to isolate them, purify them, characterize them chemically, and then we know exactly what we're dealing with.
A lot of people drink Buchu tea. Would this be the same as, say, using a Buchulife product?
The question is often asked of me, well, I have the Buchu plant growing in my garden. Can I make use of my own plant and not go and buy the commercial? One has to remember that when you are making a herbal tea, you are using boiling water. Now, a boiled water extract of the leaves may not extract the same molecules compared to what is currently in the Buchulife, which is in fact the oil distillate. So the distillation process extracts over hours different molecules compared to someone who would do the extract of just a couple of leaves that's soaking or brewed in a cup of tea with boiling water. And we have to say that medicinal plants, you have to look at different ways of extracting the actives. It's not to say that if you use boiling water, you will get exactly the same biological properties as the same leaves from which we've distilled the oil. So it's a very different process, and I don't believe that people will get the same benefits.
Okay, great. Thank you for your time, Professor.
You're most welcome. It's been a pleasure.